Hello there, everybody. So, if you talk to some drivers or watch other channels on YouTube, you may get the impression that trucking doesn't pay good wages, or you're not gonna be successful in trucking. I would counter that argument and say that you can be successful in trucking. Now, you got to do certain things in order to be successful. You got to work hard, for one. Two, you got to manage your money. You got to be smart. You got to play your cards right. Um, Let me give you some examples here. When I first started driving, I didn't have a lot of money. Um, I had worked in corporate America for about 20 years, and I wanted to do a career change because there's very little to no job security being a white collar a worker, an office worker. And I wanted a skilled trade. And I always had my eye on driving. And then I finally decided to do it. Didn't have a lot of money when I first started. I had very little money. I was kind of starting over. And I was in my 40s, starting over with a new career, a new skilled trade. And I would say within the first 5 years of driving truck, I paid off all my credit cards. I got out of debt. I paid off a $30,000 student loan. I spent, thousands of dollars getting my teeth fixed at the dentist and things like this. And then since then, I built a investment portfolio of $100,000. Now, you have investment portfolio of $100,000. You have no debt. Rebuilt my credit score at over 800, and purchased multiple trucks. So I did that all within like the first 5 years of driving truck. And when I look at the next 10 years of driving, I want to continue to invest my money and grow my savings for retirement. And if I play my cards right and all goes well, there's no reason why I couldn't retire. When I reach full Social Security age, 68, be close to having $1 million in my retirement portfolio. So who says you can't make money in trucking? I think you can. I mean, but you got to be smart. You can't be out there spending money as fast as you make it. I mean, that's silly. You never become a millionaire if you spend all your money. You got to save your money and invest it. The trucking wages could be better. There's no doubt about that. And sure, the earnings could be better and all things like that. But if you control your costs, you save your money, you learn how to invest, you can grow your savings year over year over year through the miracle of compound interest. Get into things like E-Trade or Robinhood, or I even have a brokerage account with my bank at Chase Bank. Even the Navy Federal Credit Union has a brokerage feature you could use. But oftentimes I see drivers complain about earnings, not being adequate. And yet I see them wasting money left and right on the dumbest things. They don't have a handle on their spending. As an owner operator, as an independent contractor, typically, if you're at Crete, you're running at Crete. Those guys typically run at least 100,000 miles per year, and maybe more, maybe 125,000 miles per year, and they're typically grossing over $200,000 for the year. Now, they don't get to keep all that because they got to spend money on fuel, insurance, truck payments, and things like that. But it's not uncommon for an owner-operator at Crete to earn over $100,000 per year. And if you take some of that money and you save it for retirement, I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't save, for example, just a ballpark figure of, say, $25,000 per year towards savings. That's only $2,000 per month, which is very doable for an owner operator. I mean, that may sound like a lot for somebody who doesn't drive truck, Like if you were an office worker and you're only making $65,000 a year, saving $2,000 a month may seem impossible. But if you're driving truck, you have your own truck, you're an owner operator, saving $2,000 per month towards retirement, it should be very doable. If you did that for a course of the year, it's $25,000 for the year. You're putting towards your investment portfolio, your Roth IRA, your individual brokerage account. Okay, now do that for 10 years. That's at least 250,000 right there. That's without compound interest. You put compound interest on that, you could double, triple your savings. You know, if you did it for 20 years, you would definitely be a millionaire if you did it for 20 years. And I see people driving truck for 30, 40 years. They've been driving. I've seen little old ladies who are in their 70s driving truck. And it's one of these things where it gets in your blood. Once you become a truck driver and you enjoy it, there's really nothing else you want to do. It's like, I just want to get in my truck. I just want to load. I just want to move. I just want to see the country. I just want to get my miles in. I just want to talk to other truck drivers. I'm not interested in, other people's occupations or their daily drama. I'm interested in trucking industry, truck drivers. This is what interests me. Talking to mechanics, talking to state troopers. That's fine. This is what holds my interest. But there's no reason why, someone who is a truck driver can't retire as a millionaire. Even company drivers working at Crete for 20, 30 years can retire as millionaires. You don't have to be an owner operator, but you do have to learn how to manage your money. You got to control costs. You have to save. You have to learn how to invest. These jobs are hard jobs. This is not an easy job. This is a very difficult job. It takes a lot of your time and attention. And you have to be extremely safe. You have to be extremely careful. You got a vehicle that weighs 80,000 pounds going 70 miles an hour. That's going to take a while to stop that vehicle. So you have to be extra cautious when you're around cars, and things like that. But it does pay good. Now, my story is not uncommon for a lot of truck drivers. A lot of truck drivers enter trucking, their first trucking job, they could be broke, absolutely no money. They're trying trucking as a new career. It wasn't necessarily their first choice. They got their CDL, because someone encouraged them to get the CDL, or they thought that was a good idea, or they heard that you can make some money driving truck, and they wanted to do it. It may not have been their first career choice, but once they get in it, then a lot of times guys love it. They absolutely love driving truck. And you can make good money, but there's always these asterisks. But you're gonna work hard. You're gonna be on the road 3 weeks, maybe longer, away from home, away from all the comforts of taking a shower every day. That's not always possible when you're driving truck. You're gonna be sleeping on a bunk, not a bed. You're gonna be sleeping next to other trucks that are idling all night long. Noise, a lot of noise. You're gonna deal with rush hour traffic in the big cities. There's a lot of things about driving truck that make it incredibly hard. But it does pay. I know a lot of people complain about the pay. It could pay more, that's for sure. But if you take what you have, be appreciative of what you have, save what you have, then you can grow your money. If you learn how to invest, you will reach a point in your investment journey where your investments are making more money than you are. And it's like, well, my money's making money. My money's making more money than I'm making. That's the where you want to get. But that's not going to happen overnight. That's going to take 10 years or longer to build up your investments. I think too often people want instant gratification. They want $100,000 a year income to start the job. Well, it doesn't work that way. When I started driving truck, I honestly, I think I was making 23 cents per mile, and I was a rookie. I had no experience. I was willing to take that low pay to get my foot in the door, to get experience, because no one's really gonna, pay you if you're a rookie. You gotta earn your way. Everything in trucking is earned. Nothing is given. So if you drive 100,000 miles your first year, you're only making 23 cents per mile. Well, guess what? It's like $23,000 for the year. I mean, that's a hell of a hit, but I was willing to do it because I wanted to get into trucking. And then after my rookie year, I came to Crete and I was bumped up to 43 cents per mile. It's a huge pay increase. And then after a year and a half of driving experience, I bought my first truck. And then I bought a second truck, and now I'm getting ready to buy a third truck. And my earnings now are over $100,000 a year, but that did not happen the first year or two. It took a few years to get to that level. So yes, you can make money in trucking. You'll have a lot of sacrifices, things that the average person's not willing to do. They don't have the work ethic, they don't have the desire, they don't enjoy it, a whole list of reasons why, they don't want to stick to it, but, I think for the right person, trucking is, a second chance of having a good paying career. If you take someone who is chronically unemployed, that maybe had trouble holding down a job for whatever reason. A lot of people just, are not successful working for corporations. So you just, maybe they don't have everything they need in order to be successful. But they get into trucking and then they take off. I mean, they're very successful. They went from having absolutely nothing to becoming a millionaire by the time they retire. I mean, that is a success story. Those stories should be celebrated. And you see it from people from all walks of life, all different education levels. They had a desire, they had a work ethic, they had commitment, they learned how to save money, they learned how to invest their money, and they become quite successful. Company driver or an owner operator, either or, it wouldn't necessarily matter in the long run. Company drivers do extremely well. There's guys that stay with Crete for their entire career and they retire as millionaires. You could be very successful as a company driver. The company has a matching 401k and a profit sharing plan, and they see their investments grow year over year over year. After 20 years, that investment is worth, close to $1 million or more. So when you hear stories that trucking's not worth it, there's no money, there's, all these reasons not to get in trucking. For every story out there you hear that how bad trucking is, I can tell you a story how people were actually successful in trucking. That doesn't mean it was easy, but they found a way to make it work. And they became successful. They became millionaires. They retire comfortably, but they've had to work every single day, along the way. Obviously they take their vacations, but, they're grinding it out every working day that they're in the truck. Not easy, but it can be done. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. For watching. We'll see you on the internet.